Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Saturday Night Fever. I hope I'm audible and visible to everybody. So, welcome again to another episode. This is going to be absolutely fun. I'm having so much fun doing this show. I'm really enjoying it, and I hope my viewers and our viewers are able to enjoy it as well. I will be bringing you excellent, really good people coming on here and sharing with us their experiences, and we can have a conversation with them about pretty much, anything under the sun. So I'm really happy today to actually introduce a very good friend of mine and a very old colleague of mine from way back in the day when both of us used to work at GE, and now he's charted his own path, and he's had a phenomenal career, and a very good friend of mine. George Eapen is the Group Cio of Petrofac, and Petrofac is a significant business in the oil and gas industry. He's based out of Dubai, and he runs information technology for all of Petrofac's global locations. And what is really interesting is that in various conversations I've had with George, is that we've all been hearing about digital transformation, and I think it's a much maligned, much misused phrase. So I'm hoping today we can get a view from George directly, because he's actually undertaking a massive digital transformation journey at Petrofac, and I'm hoping he can share some of the details without giving away, obviously, too much of the confidential stuff. But I'm hoping this is going to be a really interesting program for everybody here. This is technology based, but however, George is an awesome leader. One of the things that makes him that way, let's find that out, right? What makes him awesome? What makes him tick? What makes tech leadership work? And what are some of those dimensions? I think it'll be good to hear from him directly. So with that, without any further ado, I want to introduce George. Can you come online, please? George, you need to turn your camera on.
Hi, Bharat. How are you
Hey,
doing?
George. Great. Thanks for taking the time, my friend. Good to see
Likewise.
you.
Good to see you too.
All right. So, can the audience hear George? I hope everybody can hear George as well. Just give me a thumbs up. Say yes. Excellent. Thank you, Chirag. All right. That's great. So, George, as I was telling you, Saturday Night Fever is something that we just started, that I just started, and it's great to have you on. This is our second episode. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a big cheese, so it's always difficult to get the big cheese on board and coming on to have a chat. So really appreciate it. If you don't mind, I'd love to have you actually introduce yourself, because I've seen the trajectory of your career, and I know you as a person. We'll get to the personal part of it pretty shortly, but could you share a little bit about what got you into this whole thing in information technology, and what are some of the steps along the way that you took to get to where you are right now?
Awesome. Thanks, Bharat, again for inviting me. It's my pleasure. So, to briefly talk about right now, as you mentioned, I'm the Group Cio of Petrofac. Petrofac is an oil and gas EPC company. We're a publicly traded company based in London Stock Exchange. So, my current mandate within Petrofac is to drive IT and digital transformation. I'm doing it with the help of a team of 500 people who work with me.
Okay.
I'm leading cyber, digital, infrastructure space, application space, and we are also implementing an ERP cloud. So there's a lot of exciting work going on in Petrofac right now, and I have a global team. My employees are based across the world, as well as my IT team. So I have resources
Okay.
in Malaysia till US, but primarily my team sits in UK, India, and in Middle East. So that's all about Petrofac. But before starting Petrofac, I spent 12 years in one of the best companies in the world, General Electric. Still super passionate when I talk about
Yeah,
it.
same here, man.
Yes. So I started my career with G as a graduate engineer, straight from the college. I was an electrical engineer, so I will say, to be honest, with all humility, I never picked IT. Rather, I happened to get into IT, right? And being an electrical engineer, starting career in IT, I don't think I would have survived if it was not.
You're lucky, you at least got an engineering degree. I've got an economics degree, and I got stuck in IT. So, hey, you
Okay,
can't beat that yet. I still got to see somebody who can beat that.
okay.
So,
So
anyway, sorry. Please
I
go
feel
on.
better. I feel a bit better now. But the truth here is, I got to I got to start my career with an amazing company like G, with amazing set of mentors and leaders around me. So in G, there was a lot of opportunity to grow if you perform as well as display right values. Because G was very heavy on not only what you do, also how you do. So 2 years into G, I was selected into a leadership program within G called as IMLP, which is an entry-level leadership program. I
Yeah.
graduated from the program 2 years later. Then I was selected into another leadership program called as Six Sigma Black Belt, which was a role where you have to manage, you have to influence people without authority. You have to drive change without no direct control. It was great fun. And once I finished that, I got into an executive level leadership program in G called as corporate audit staff. So I will
Yeah.
say, I got roles of increasing responsibility within G. Most of them I didn't pick it, right? I did not plan my career working backwards. I just went with the flow. But I always tried to give the best in whatever role I was doing.
Hmm.
And once I graduated from this executive level leadership program, and I was able to travel all around the world, work with G Capital in Singapore, G Oil and Gas in Italy, G Healthcare in Milwaukee. But once I graduated, I preferred to come back to Middle East to become the CTO for G for Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, which was a $17 billion region. And few years into the role, cybersecurity was becoming a prominent topic in the Middle East. We were seeing a lot of cyber attacks on the big companies. So G as a company who is selling solution to our customers, there was always question from our customers about how secure is our product and questions on cybersecurity. So we
Yep.
realized we need someone who understands cyber to be with the business to help them, uh, work with our customers. I was asked whether I will be able to do it because one, during my executive level leadership program, I did some auditing, which gave me
Okay.
some fundamentals of cybersecurity. But the question was mainly because I was a team leader managing a big team as a CTO. And the role which was offered to me at that time was an individual contributor. So the concern was, does George want to move from a team leader to an individual contributor? But I did not look into any of those things. Rather, I looked into the role and I felt I could make a bigger impact for the company in that new role. So I took that role. Within few years, I grew my team into multiple people sitting in Saudi, Turkey, Egypt, in UAE, and seeing this model, G started to hire more cyber leaders in the regions like China, in India, Asia Pacific, because cyber is something where you also need to understand the local regulations. So there are a few things about cyber. I'll talk into detail. But long story short, I was asked to lead the entire cyber team, managing the G international regions,
Okay.
which is anything outside of US. So it was actually, a very, very, very exciting challenge. And at that time, actually, I got an opportunity to join Petrofac to be their first ever group CISO. What I liked in Petrofac was actually it's a great company like G, but I was also going to get an opportunity to build a team again from scratch. So what I realized is, Bharat, I get that kick of building things, and
All
I'm
right.
someone who can do operational stuff for a long time. I need the adrenaline kick of building something.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Hey, thanks for that. Really, what is really interesting about this whole thing is how we all, yourself, myself, a lot of, and pretty much everybody here, we all actually love to create stuff, right? We like to build things. So what I'm curious about is that when you mentioned that in GE you went from building a large team and running a large team and so on to moving back to becoming an individual contributor, right? What were some of the things? What you mentioned that you were really wondering whether this was going to be a step back in your career and so on, right? So what made you actually go down that path, and what were some of the things that you got out of it?
A very wise man, one of my mentors actually, told very early in my career that leadership is not the sign of how many people report to you. Leadership is all about how many people you can influence without that direct authority, right? Look, anyone can get things done by using his managerial, I will say, I will not use the word power because that gives a
Sure,
wrong message, but
sure,
the managerial remit.
sure. Absolutely.
But and Steve Jobs made a quote that actually we actually are not managing people. We should build capability under us.
Mm,
We should show them a vision, and if we need to tell them every team meeting what they need to do, then there's something wrong. They should be shown the path and create the motivation for them to go and do it. So
sure.
long story short, Bharat, very early in my career, I was kind of detached from the concept of, hey, your role is not defined by how many people are under you, right? I
Right.
was never I never got stuck into it, and I have taken always a risk actually. So to me, the bigger question was not the number of people, rather it was about moving from an operational area like CTO with a big team to
Mm,
support me to a new area called cyber in the Middle East where there is increasing cyber threats.
right.
The risk is more, the risk of failure is more.
Right.
So that risk appetite, probably I had a pretty decent
Right. No, that's good. That's good. So actually, I want to share with our audience. This is a very interesting exercise I'd like for all of you to do whenever you get the time. This is not. It's a simple thing. It's called a lifeline, right? It's called actually a life map. So think about a chart which on your x-axis you've got time, and on your y-axis you've just got low and high, and you can rate it in any scale you want, 1 to 10 if you want. And if you look at your career as in terms of a chart, you will very rarely find it a straight line, right? What we all see on LinkedIn and what we see on people's resumes and things like that always looks like a straight line. But if you really dig into it for each one of us, I think we'll never find a straight line, right, George? I mean, I think we're going to see highs and lows and ups and downs. And, ultimately we make that journey. So it's pretty much like a journey. Another comment you made that I find very interesting is a lot of times we talk a lot about being a big shot, being a CXO, C-suite, etc. And automatically we think about a lot of we think about power, we think about authority. But one of the most underrated skills that leaders need to develop, I think, is influence. The ability to influence across levels, upward, downward, sideways. What are your thoughts on that, in terms of influencing as a critical leadership skill?
Absolutely. So I think influencing is a absolute must for anyone who is aspiring to take a senior leadership role. But the key question we should ask here is how you can influence someone, right? So, in my opinion, I have been pretty successful in on the influencing side, but I was not very successful from day one, right? So I, as you mentioned, I learned the art of influencing through some tough failures, which was, but the good thing is that was very early in my career in my executive level leadership program. So what I learned is actually to influence someone, you need to do some homework. Okay,
Hmm.
first you need to understand the topic you are talking about. So
Right.
there's a lot of credibility on what you are talking is going to be the fundamental. You cannot influence if you doesn't come across as someone providing credible inputs or data points. So
Sure.
you need to do some homework. You need to know what you're talking about. You need to do your research. You need to understand your audience, right? How much they know,
Hmm.
what's their background, what's their concern, what's their problem. You need to connect their problem with your proposal, right? So, and third thing, facts and data, right? You cannot influence someone unless you can actually throw some credible data point, right?
Okay.
So I can give an example, right? So one of my presentation, like 2 years back, I was talking about user adoption, right,
Okay.
of some collaborative technologies like Teams. But
Hmm.
what I did was I went with a chart, right, and the chart showed pre-COVID and post-COVID. And what I only have to do that pull up a chart which shows how the number of calls has increased pre-COVID and post-COVID, like almost like 10 times.
Right.
I told them what I have to do or my team has to do on the infrastructure side to manage this additional load, right? And the team has done a fantastic job. So if I did not put the data, those kind of work will be going unsolved. And again, why I'm telling is IT professionals has a tough challenge. Why? Because most of the times IT is hidden, IT is invisible. A lot of things work on the back end, right? So when things are super stable, a lot of times we may not get noticed, right? So influencing and storytelling is key, but you need to do one, you need to know what you're talking. Don't bluff, never ever bluff. Say, I don't know, right? If you are not able to answer something. Second, know your audience and what's the problem. Third, use data.
All right, cool. So this, when you brought up the point of, IT being invisible, the analogy I always tell people is like, IT is like a light switch. You notice it only when you flip the switch and the light doesn't come on.
Yeah.
Until such time, you flip the switch, you don't even bother about it. You walk into the room and your, laptop is working, your PC is working, your network is up, everything is fine. So, that's very, very cool. The interesting thing that you brought up about influencing is really, so if I were to summarize, you said, one is have the credibility, right? So do your research, have the credibility, know your audience, and actually work with data. Now, being in the C-suite, and you've worked your way up to the C-suite now, right? There's a big difference between influencing as an individual contributor or as a manager. Like, how do you influence your boss? How do you influence even your peer level, right? Like, for example, you're coming up with a new idea in terms of how you're going to develop something. That's a scope of influencing. And again, I think those same rules apply, right, George? I mean, irrespective of what level you're at, I think those same basic rules apply. I mean, have credibility, know your stuff, right? Do your homework, work with the audience that you know, understand your audience, and understand what it is that specifically you're going after. And then the data shall set you free. So thanks a lot for that. That was really, really, really insightful. So audience, I just want to pause here and please, I'm seeing some questions coming up, but please go ahead, make your comments, pop up questions. There's a lot of stuff that we still got to cover over here, but please jump in there, okay? All right, so cybersec. Let's start with the easy stuff, right? Now, cybersecurity has been for quite some time now, has been something that is top of minds for all organizations. I think pretty much at all levels, right? I mean, irrespective of whether it's the business or it's IT, right? And now, especially where cybersec has the potential to be almost weaponized. What are the kinds of things that you in your organization or in other organizations are doing? Because one of the biggest vulnerabilities in cybersec is actually internal security, right? Where you've got your own internal stakeholders who have the potential to make your cyber network vulnerable. So what do you do? What are some of the things that you do to manage that? How do organizations look out for something like that?
Sure. I think cybersecurity is definitely a priority at board level for any organization. And you are right, like cyber is right now getting weaponized. We call cyber warfare. And we even use the terminology called nation actors, which means most of the developed countries have their own cyber army to target their opponents. And if you think about it, right, the cost of a physical war versus cyber war is completely different. And if you target the critical infrastructure of any country, it can be an airport or seaport, a power plant, you are actually hitting the nerve line of the economy, right? So clearly it's getting weaponized. Now, the kind of risk I'm seeing is different because I'm running an enterprise. So the incentive for a cyber warfare against any enterprise will be less because their target will be more critical infrastructure, right? So if your organization into critical infrastructure, you have to ensure that you're facing cyber army with a lot of technology for their backing. So you need to up your game. But most of the other organizations, the risk vary from what kind of organization you are, right? For example, if you are into a bank and you deal with credit card details of your customers, right?
Right.
Maybe the guys wants to get that info so they can sell it in the black, right? Black market. If you are into healthcare industry and you are working on some intellectual property related to some new medicine coming up, maybe the bad guys wants to get that data. So it varies, right? It can be a ransomware, it can be a data theft. It depends on which industry to which industry. So the
Right.
key here is there is no silver bullet. A good CISO first should do is actually do a risk assessment of his organization. What is the crown jewel which you should not lose? What is the crown jewel which the bad guys can come after? So for our industry, what we think is disruption, business disruption
Right.
is meeting, right?
Mhm.
So if someone can bring our key operations down, it create a ripple effect, right? A knock-on impact. So when you talk about internal vulnerabilities, so one of the threat that we always see is insider threats, right? But in any organization, right?
Sure.
And most of the time, actually, the threat is coming from unintentional insiders. So it's not that they have a malicious
Malicious intent. Okay.
intent, they probably doesn't do the basics, right? So what we normally do is actually one, we have a pretty good visibility on who has the keys to the kingdom, right? So in technology world, we call them as domain admin.
Right.
What it means is if a domain admin account is compromised, your entire estate is compromised. So the first question is, do you have visibility to your domain admin? Do you have proper onboarding, offboarding process, right?
Right.
So if you clean it up and keep it to a very limited number of domain admin, a thorough review, and make them accountable, turn the audit log,
Right.
a lot of those things will be taken care. The second step is education and awareness. Now you are not talking about your domain admin, you're talking about your critical users who may not be as risky as a domain admin but still can cause risk. This is where any organization should have active cyber campaigns. So there are a lot of things we can talk about.
Sure.
Unintentional, but
The part that I'm really curious about is really two things, right? One is, especially now in today's world where we're all disconnected, right? We're all working remotely. And I think that trend is only going to increase. I don't believe that that's really going to come down any. Yeah, there may be a little bit of shifts here and there. And now I hear about organizations saying, okay, hey, let's get back to work, get back to the physical workplace and so on. But there is no doubt in anybody's mind. There should be no doubt in anybody's mind that now we've uncorked the genie from the bottle of remote work or work from anywhere, right? So where do corporations start to draw the lines? There's one way in which we do it, which is, just manage everything within firewalls and so on. But we're all noticing nowadays that, firewalls really don't mean anything, right? And especially in this work from home, remote work, and etc., that must be throwing up a whole bunch of challenges for you guys, especially considering you've got such a vast workforce around the world. I mean, that must be keeping you up at nights, I would think.
absolutely.
So what are some of the things that you're doing, especially because, if I'm sitting here in a coffee shop or in a Starbucks and I'm logging in to work, what are some of the things that corporations are doing right now to actually start to manage and control that?
So I think any enterprise has to manage two things, right? One is employee experience and productivity versus cybersecurity, right? So if you make your cybersecurity to a level, if you secure it to a level where your employee experience or productivity doesn't happen, your end users cannot work, then you fail, right? End of the day, you're as good as long as the business runs, right?
That's
so
right.
You have to drive the balance. Everything is a risk. So you have to quantify the risk and you need to see how you can contain the risk. The example you mentioned, you're right. Now, there's no more perimeter security because workplace has moved from offices to people's house.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where actually we look into the concept of what is our users accessing, right? Any organization, 80% of the users maybe need basic access like maybe timesheet or expenses.
Right.
A lot of collaboration tools in place. So we have the concept of edge applications where you can access it, right? No problem. But what we also make sure is there's no intellectual property within that edge application can be, stolen or gone into wrong hands. Then we also make sure that whatever critical for your company, like 20%, right? You make it still as a core application, which means you may be working from home, but you still need to use a VPN to come in. Now, when you put a VPN tunnel, we can put a lot of security control, layer it. Like, first of all, there will be a password. We can make sure the password strength is 15 characters, right? That's
Right.
a lot of words, eliminate a lot of words. Second, we will add an MFA or multi-factor authentication.
Multi-factor authentication.
Get into the VPN, you need to have multi-factor authentication. Then you are accessing an application, you will again have a user ID there. Most of the time, we look at like an SSO. So
Right. SSO especially. Major vulnerability.
Exactly. So look, it's a balance, and a good CISO normally layer his security controls. He doesn't put everything in one place, right? So you have level one, okay. If it gets breached, oh, there's a level two, there's a level three, level four. So it's a combination of security controls layered, which actually protects you from a campaign or targeted attack.
Super. All right, switching gears now. Actually, I've got a very interesting question. I just thought I'd take it right now. Anish asks, how do you really manage a non-tech remote team? Especially because, it's really difficult to ensure productivity. And that's an interesting question because we are finding now non-tech folks actually having to work remotely, especially if you take a look at the Salesforce, for example, right? They're pretty much everybody's out and on the road. So what are some of the, what would be some ways in which those organizations need to take a look at these things in order to be able to manage the productivity of these kinds of this class of workers?
Look, I think, to be honest, I have a different view on that.
Okay.
Look, there's nothing positive about COVID, right? But one thing COVID has done is this digital adoption of technologies like Zoom and Teams, and remote working is not the only thing happened remotely. Remote schooling, a lot of things happen remotely. So I think the acumen or IT acumen of any normal employee, be it IT, non-IT, has increased a lot purely because he has a family member or a kid doing a remote schooling. So all of these technologies has become a bit more. I'm pretty sure they don't understand.
They've actually become mainstream.
Exactly, they don't understand the details. However, like Netflix or WhatsApp or Amazon Prime, it's popular right now. Everyone uses it. So the productivity point of view, look, we definitely, like, I'm not generalizing. There are specific set of people who are on the road. So we think about the productivity in a different way. Like we give them mobile apps and mobile devices, like iPads. But for a general user, I think the collaboration tools like Teams and Zoom,
I think so.
quite easy.
I think it's, I'll tell you, ever since COVID, especially, right? And now that, I'm primarily a coach, and that's what I do. It's amazing. I mean, all of my interactions now, easily 95 to 99% of my interactions are virtual. And I think people are still able to get the value out of it. Sure, there is, initially when this whole thing started, and I was thinking, oh my God, I'm now going to coach people virtually. How the heck am I going to do that? And guess what? It actually works. It really does. So until you get into that mode, and I think now this is becoming more and more the norm. So people are, the adoption part of it is really cool. Great. So let me switch gears now to to really talk about a very interesting piece of work. Everybody talks about digital transformation, right? It's one of the buzzwords of what's going on right now in the tech space and the tech world, right? So why is it first and foremost, what does digital transformation mean to you, George? What do you think about when you think about digital transformation?
Look, I think as a business leader, to me, it can be anything, including adding a new capability to increase my top line growth or top line revenue, or it can be digitizing some existing processes to increase my productivity, to better my bottom line or reduce cost. So to me, it's all about a business outcome, right? It can also be putting a new capability to improve the safety of our employees or improve the compliance posture. So anything which can add a definite value to your organization. And if IT can drive that, because to me, digital transformation or broader digital is all about IT moving from a back office function, keeping the lights on, to a revenue enabler or a cost saver.
Okay. But one of the things that one of the things that marks digital transformation is really the fact that now you're taking the IT as a department out of technology, right? In the sense that the businesses now are able to actually leverage IT now more from a more ubiquitous, all-pervasive sort of a computing model, right? So in that case, the information technology, the traditional information technology department that manages infrastructure, that manages networks, that manages blah, 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 all the 101 things that go into it, there's a shift, right? There's a shift that is occurring. So which means now the people like me who used to have these IT skills now need something way more than just that, right? We need to understand customer, as in the business customer. We need to understand external factors like, what's the supply chain look like? What is the value chain, the front end sales chain look like? Customer prospects, CRM, blah, 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 all the rest of that together, right? So how can a guy in technology, in IT, how can that kind of a person gear up for this world that we're moving into, leveraging digital transformation? And how are
Sure.
you doing it in your organization more?
Sure.
Is
So
something.
I can share my perspective here
Sure.
and my perspective. And in my organization, we have a great partnership between IT and business, and we are driving digital together as a common agenda. Now let me tell you my perspective. In my perspective, right, I really don't think IT is shifting completely, and we need new set of skill set. We need to know our every customer. No need.
Okay.
But in our business, there will be someone who knows those customers,
Okay.
who know the customer's problem. So IT has to, first of all, digital is not driven 100% by IT alone. You
Okay.
need to have a good partnership with a counterpart in business who may be facing customer, who probably know customer problem, but you are sitting with them and ideating how do we solve the problem, right? So to come back to your point, but I want to make something clear, right? So, and I do face that challenge nowadays.
Okay.
I see that a lot of young talent who just coming from straight from college,
Mhm.
they want to work only in AI or ML or data science, the niche things or cyber, right?
Absolutely.
Very few people are interested in network or hosting
Right.
or data center, storage. Very few people are interested in operations. The truth here is you cannot drive digital if you don't have your fundamentals built properly.
Absolutely.
I call it as fixing the basics. So I don't think, so digital is more like a motivation factor, right? If you build a capability which can increase your revenue, awesome. A
Got it.
traditional IT like network is your hygiene factor. If
Right.
your network breaks every single time, you're going to bleed a lot of money. A lot of money. You
Yeah,
need to do digital.
that's great. You're giving me the line as a CIO. All right. You're giving me the line as a CIO because I'm sure you've got your employees listening in over here. But I've got to tell you, I've got to really ask you something. How do you motivate that employee of yours who's sitting there managing mission critical infrastructure, right? And is the unsung hero around this whole thing, right? You've got your networks, you've got your data centers, you've got, the cloud now, and you've got a whole bunch of things that are being managed quietly on the back end. And you've got a bunch of guys on your team who are out there doing all this sexy, new, cool stuff, right? Because I know you must be implementing AI, you must be doing some shit with ML, you're working on customer experience, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. What do you do to enable, or rather to be able to help these guys understand these two different groups of people? How do you tell this guy who's managing this mission critical infrastructure that, hey, you know what? You're really valuable to me. You're valuable to this organization. And despite the fact that they see these guys doing all this cool stuff on the front end, and they seem to be getting all the attention. So how does that work for you?
No, I think it's a very, very good question. And I also feel that challenge at times. A lot of this operational thing, as you mentioned, is like switching the light on. If the light is on, people doesn't care, right?
Right.
Why the light is on. They only make noise if the light is not on. So in a traditional world, a lot of visibility or limelight with the business, right? Even if you go and pitch a story, no one go and talk about your story on how good is your network or your data center. You talk about digital capability. So
Right.
after a long time, there will be a section of employees who get the limelight, their projects being talked more,
Hmm.
and they get the face cam with the business. So I do face that challenge with some of my infrastructure and cyber or the traditional tech space where people don't get much airtime with
Right.
the stakeholder, because for
Hmm.
them I am the stakeholder. So look, what we normally do is actually one a little bit of expectation setting, right? The truth here is the nature of IT is sometimes operational, right? So this
True.
is just like a sales guy, right? You cannot be in a sales job if you're not ready to take the sales pressure or the meeting the numbers pressure. You can't complain saying that, oh, this is too tough for me. I can't, I get too much pressure to meet my numbers. So the right is, in that case, you need to change your profession, right? You should not be doing
Absolutely.
this. So
Absolutely.
my feedback to my team is, one, we make sure that their efforts are recognized. We are actually calling them out in staff meetings, team meetings, reward them. We give them upskilling, we give them cross skilling. For example, a traditional hosting guy, we give them Azure trainings. So there's always something new, exciting coming, new projects coming. But when it comes to the visibility pass, there are few things which which will probably are more internal, right? So end of the day, is expectation setting. But in my opinion, the best way to start a career is start with infrastructure, start with your basic infrastructure,
Mm.
understand the network hosting, then take up cybersecurity, because that will give you an absolute grip on the technology. And then you can move on to higher things. So I have seen a lot of CTOs becoming CIOs and doing very well.
Right.
So, but it's a fantastic question, but it's like sometimes you feel like
It's a tough question. It's
it's
not.
tough.
I'm not expecting a right or wrong answer from you,
Yeah,
George, because
it's a challenge.
we all know how the struggle is, right? I
It's
mean,
a challenge. So sometimes, if you think about it, like some people. So I always have this concept of player, prisoner, and tourist, right? So
player,
player,
prisoner, and
tourist. Okay.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay,
So player is someone who is your type A player, like who is going to bring
got
the
it.
real game, right? He's highly
Uh-huh.
motivated. He needs the visibility. He needs the appreciation. But he is a go-getter, get things done. A prisoner, and again, don't go with the word prisoner because it's a negative word. But prisoner means someone who is happy in a room,
Got it.
and he's happy doing a routine thing, right? So if you think about it, a
Right.
digital thing is more for a player who wants that limelight, where there are people who are happy and content, just doing good work,
Sure.
right? So, and just to
I
close the
think
loop, tourist is.
that's very interesting because one of the things that I've always believed in, is that sure, there's always going to be the cream of the crop, right? I mean, what we call the cream of the crop, the 10%ers, the 20%ers, who are right up at the very top creamy layer of any organization, irrespective of the job function. But what most organizations fail to take care of is really that bulk of the people who carry and do the heavy lifting day after day after day.
Yep.
And, though that may sound like, it's just, bull work, it's not. And surprisingly, as organizations, we have a tendency to focus only on those, the 10, 20%ers, and the 70%ers are sort of 70, 80%ers are taken for granted.
Yep.
Right. So, one of the things I think as leaders, not just as leaders, even in organizations, and to all of our listeners over here and viewers over here, I want you all to remember this, right? Take care of the people who are the unsung heroes in any organization. Take care of those people. Believe me, they will take care of you double. It's very, very critical. Yes, absolutely, you need to take care of the top talent in your organization. No two ways about it. But do not neglect the people who are sitting there doing the heavy lifting day after day after day for you, for the organization. These are the ones I call the unsung heroes in any organization.
True.
All right, cool. So, some of the what are some of the things? Because you remember I shared a model with you, right? Which was digital transformation model. I mean, or rather, a framework, I should say. So, when we talk about one of the big things about digital transformation is really customer experience, right? There's a lot of focus given to customer experience, employee experience, partner experience. It's all experiential, right? So the key word there is experience. what are these things? Let's demystify some of this stuff. And especially within quotes an old world company like Petrofac in the oil and gas business, right? What does digital transformation mean to you guys?
Sure. So there are different ways of looking into it, right? First of all, I don't think again there is a standard silver bullet answer. It defines. If you ask 10 people, all 10 may have a different definition for what is digital
Right.
digital transformation. Let me share my version, right? So in my version, you need to have your fundamentals super, right? You cannot drive digital if you don't have good security practices or policies or controls in place or not have good infrastructure, right? So once you have your fundamentals fixed, second step in the journey is, I will call it as digitization. What it means is actually before you go and improve your customer experience, you try to make sure that you have tools and technologies in place to give you visibility, right? Because we call it as integrated project delivery.
Okay.
The data should not change from one function to another function, right? You need to know end to end how your project is being delivered. And for that, you need ideally one system like an ERP, but it's impossible to have one system which can meet everything. So you will end up with one system with some hybrid systems around it. A lot of the companies may not have the digitalization or digitization part sold. They still need to build some technology in to make sure we move from Excel's managed in people's laptops to a system-based report.
Sure.
So data lake, everything comes there, right? A single source of truth for data. So Petrofac has been investing a lot on this second part, which is digitization. To me, it's digital, but it's building capability.
Okay.
The third part is, I call it as digital optimization, right? So I'm breaking digital transformation into two things: digital optimization and digital disruption. Okay, and again, it's my definition. It's not.
That's interesting.
My way of putting it.
Yeah. That's please.
So, digital disruption is you are building a capability which is going to disrupt the market. This is where you are outbidding your competitors, and you probably are going to win more work and generate more revenue, right? But it's very ambitious, very aspirational, and very difficult for you to disrupt because a lot of your customers may be different, their requirement is different, their pain is different. What I am focusing is on the digital optimization. So optimization is all about how I can make my bottom line better, my company's bottom line better. Where is inefficiency? How can I make it more productivity? So all automation work. A lot of projects which we are doing on engineering side or supply chain side, like artificial intelligence. How I can do a work in 10 days, which is today taking 50 days. How much money I can save back?
Gotcha.
How can I do a work with 50 employees, which is today taking 200 employees. A lot of our work is on digital optimization because we can measure it, and it's a tough one, but we know we can deliver it. But disruption, so it's a choice I have made, or my management and my leadership collectively made. Let's invest where we are assured of a return. Right?
Where we know. Okay.
So it's all maturity. Yeah. So yeah.
Right. Awesome. That's so cool. You see, because the one of the things that I find in this world of digital transformation is, everybody just throws jargon as far as technology is concerned. Right? They say, yeah, it means, a convergence of technologies. It means, AI, ML, big data, all of this stuff all coming together, and some magic happens. And I think the important thing, as you laid out, I fully see what you're talking about. It's really multiple tools that need to be applied where they need to be applied. So as you said, to optimize, one is obviously you need to have your core infrastructure and stuff ready to be able to scale to those new things that are going to be needed. But optimizing what you have and then going and looking at the disruptive elements of it, I think is a valuable insight for many of our listeners here and viewers. Thanks for that. That was very, very insightful. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. All right. I'm going to take another few minutes and then we'll jump into some questions. There's some very interesting questions that have popped up over here. I want to make sure that our audience gets a chance to, ask in and participate. But the question I really want to go back to is, in the areas of technology, right? In the area of technology and technology leadership, when we talk about leaders in technology and technology leadership, where do organizations, what happens to organizations when they, or what are some of the factors that go into failure? Where do organizations fail, and how do organizations learn and grow from them? I know it's a big question, but specifically in the element of technology, right? We all know all organizations make big mistakes in terms of technology, whether it is cybersec, whether it's even the whole process of now migrating to the cloud, which is now becoming pretty much, it's a no-brainer. You just have to do it. But what makes technology and technology leaders fail? What are some of the factors that go into that you've observed in your career and in your life?
I think there are a lot of things for failure. Okay, and I cannot generalize, but let me call out few things which I think I've seen in my experience in this space. One is actually setting wrong expectation and overcommitting, right? Especially
Okay.
when it comes to technology, you have the tendency of going with the sales pitch of the technology partner, right? And you make some wrong expectation because there's no perfect technology.
Right.
I'm
Right.
perfect. I'm certain about it. Like
Absolutely.
whatever you're finding for your problem statement, it will end up solving 80% of your problem statement. You
Right.
don't know what you don't know, and you have to figure out how you navigate, right? So have that expectation setting without overcommitting is one thing,
Hmm.
which I sometimes feel people get excited and
They
fail to
carry
do.
away.
It can
They carry away.
actually cause them damage, right?
Yeah.
They look for the initial glory or the initial appreciation rather, give a tough message beginning. Like if it's going to cost more, it will cost more. So have that tough message early in the game is going to help you from not failing, right? The second thing which I feel is when you make a huge technology change, you need to get buy-in. You need to buy-in from your key stakeholders. So if you go with the G cap way, change, acceleration, right?
Right.
You
Change
need to get
acceleration
stakeholder
program. Yep.
management,
Yep. Yep.
promoter, neutral, demoter, but more importantly, forget about all those jargons, right? What I mean by here is you need to make sure that you are aligned with other key stakeholders on the problem and what are you trying to do.
Right.
I have seen many times the failure is happening in team full of top talents, top performers, high performers, because they all want to make their thing work, right? So
Everybody wants to change the world. They all
exactly.
want to change the world.
So the problem is actually the failure is less if you have one or two typer personality in a team with rest everyone is ready to follow them, right? The failure is more when you have a team of all of them top performers with completely amazing ideas but differing ideas, right? So alignment is very key at all levels, at leadership level, at team level. So so that's something which I've seen can cause failure. So these are the two things, but
Terrific.
yeah,
Terrific. Thank you. Because that gives me a perfect segue into some of the questions that I've got over here. So I've got, there are two questions that are related, one from Ashay and one from Chirag, and I'm going to ask you both of these. One is, how do you attract good talent at a startup? And secondly, what are some of the things that people look for in a good leader? Influence being one. So one is from, how do you get good talent? And the other is, how do you get, or how do you look for, what do you look for in a good leader?
sure. I think let me start with the talent piece. Look, I think great question, and honestly, there are a lot of things which will play about a career path, a good compensation, selling your. And look, a lot of people like to work for a company which is for a cause, right? So if you can actually show all those things, even it's a startup, but the startup is going to build something for the society or the world, which is going to make the world a better place. You have a higher chance of returning some great people, right? But you will need to take care of them. The bigger question we all need to ask is not attract good talent. How do we retain good talent? Because if you lose a good talent, that's a big problem that we need to live with.
Yeah.
Let me move to the second question, which is what are the good things you look for a good leader? Great question. And look, I will be a little bit. Let me honestly share my thoughts. Right. I have learned more from not good leaders, from leaders who gave me tough time. Okay, and I'm not asking any leaders out there to be give tough time to their team. What I'm telling is, if I look my entire career path of 2024, sorry, 22 managers, I had 20 amazing managers who I loved working with them. And I have two amazing managers with whom I did not like working with because they give me a lot of tough time. They stretch me. They were not happy with my outcome. They keep, throwing it to me. It was very difficult for me to take. But when I look back today, I learned more from those two managers because they made me more strong. They made me more resilient. Look,
Hmm.
let me keep that on the side.
Okay.
We should not always aim to be that good leader because you can always fall into the trap, especially if you are a new leader, new CIO, new CXO, because you want to be liked by everyone. You want to be the most popular.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
Popularity contest leaders versus people who actually are leaders is a very different thing, right?
Exactly. A good leader will still give tough message. No, influence is good. I will say, just to add one more thing, authentic leadership. Be yourself.
Yeah.
Just be yourself. Look, if you want to emote, emote. If you want to, give them a hug, right? But what I'm telling is, don't try to be different because people can see through whether you are authentic or not authentic. And if you're authentic, you can actually pull it through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we could go on talking about this topic on leadership because it's something I'm totally passionate about. And I mean, I've spent pretty much most of my life, George, just growing good leaders in organizations. So one of the things I want to add to what George just said, folks, is that authentic leadership is what George talked about. There's this one very fundamental principle to being an effective leader, and I think that's making and meeting commitments to anybody, not just people, or even to your organization, because consistency is the key, right? People will align when they start to see momentum. And how do you build momentum? You build momentum through movement, and you build movement by making and meeting commitments. Step by step, my friend, step by step, right? It's brick by brick. And leadership, honestly speaking, folks, is not rocket science. All of us have it in us to be leaders. The difference is whether we choose to go down that path and make it a conscious choice versus something that just comes instinctively. A lot of times we talk about leadership from people who we observe who are great leaders because they were just made that way, right? We know, we see so many of them throughout history, even in today's world. But there are a very large percentage of leaders who have grown to become leaders. So it is a growth process. Keep that in mind. I think that's very critical. All right, so I'm going to jump into another question here, which is I think there was somebody who asked a question about, what are the challenges in the process of digital transformation, but I think we've already
Yes, sir.
addressed that. This was a very interesting one, right? As a startup, you're trying to hire a VP of engineering. How do you go about it? Do they really take, I assume, Nishant, you're asking ESOPs and the
Yes, sir.
risk? Let's skip the ESOPs part of it. But if you want to hire a VP of engineering, what are you going to go about doing? How are you going to look for somebody like that?
Look, I think these are like niche skill set, and it will be super highly paid in any organization, in established organization, and you probably need to hire someone who has done it.
I
Because
think you're talking about it more from a startup
I
perspective,
know
I
for a
presume.
startup, you need to bring a VP of engineering who has done it in an organization. So the problem here is, as a startup, you cannot afford to bring someone who has not done it, right? So you need to bring someone who has done it, and it will be based on what I'm seeing. This kind of skill set can be very expensive and can be niche. So it will all go back to your HR practices and policies, which I cannot comment. But one thing I can tell is actually good talent. You need to take care of good talent, right? So I have seen this dilemma.
And you
We
need
need
to
the
pay
right
for good
talent,
talent.
but we may not be able to afford them. Sorry, Bharat?
No, I think we need to pay for good talent. We need to be willing to pay for good talent.
And
Right?
treat them well.
Yeah, treat them well. Yeah, pamper them. What the heck? I mean, they've earned it, right? I mean, that's why you want them. So, you
Yeah.
know. So let me just take that question a little bit, and Nishant, let me try taking a stab at it. Right. First and foremost, I think if you're talking about a startup sort of a mindset, I really want you to think about designations. Because the moment you peg something as a VP of engineering and you're trying to build a structure already, I don't know what stage you're at, but if you're a startup, think about it more from the purpose that you're aligning these people for. I think George mentioned this earlier, which is really got to do with the fact that, have a vision that attracts people. that people want to be a part of that journey, right? That's the part that you really want to look at. And if you're talking about somebody to lead technology and lead engineering for you from a product development perspective, well, I think that's going to be one of the single biggest hires that you're going to have to do for your organization. That is going to be the fulcrum around which a lot of this, your product capability is going to revolve. So the two big investments in my mind that you got to be thinking about for your startup is one who's going to drive the business and another who's going to drive the product. So these are two key investments. I think you just going to have to say, hey, you know what? If I want the best, I got to be willing to treat them like the best. And that's what I take that. All right. I don't know, George. I presume you've got any other perspective, right?
Maybe this is one of those roles where you need to overinvest.
I agree. I couldn't say it better. All right, this is one that is interesting. Okay, yeah, this is a very interesting one, and this is a perfect CIO question, actually. This comes from Gaurav. How do you work on tech debt and business requirements side by side with a small team? Technical debt and business requirements with a small team, and how do you make the choices?
First of all, look, whoever you are, which company you're working for, just understand, have that empowerment that you are an employee of the company and we have the same right as your business counterpart. Because what I've seen always, a problem in IT is actually we kind of get a little bit, not the word intimidated, but a little bit, feel that, oh, my stakeholder decides my performance. Let's come out of it. We are an employee like that, right? This is a perfect question, which is very easy for me to answer because you just need to go. This is my number of employees. They can only work 8 hours a day and they need to take vacation. Okay. This is what we committed to you last year, which we are still work in progress. Now we are throwing this thing. Okay. To do this thing, every single thing, I need to hire 50 more people, which is not practical. Now you go and tell me what is the value of some of these projects. I ask this question. Tell me where I can see the benefits. Now, if I can justify the value for some of them, you can reprioritize. You can drop some of your ongoing projects if it's not that valuable. But if that is valuable and the new projects are valuable, then you go back and hire people, like 10 people, 15 people, whatever it is, and get the business sign off on the cost. But never ever get on the, I will say, don't feel that we don't have a voice in the team.
Right. Very true. Very, very true. So I'm going to just rephrase here, Gaurav. You've asked the question. I've been a CIO, George is a CIO. One of the things you got to realize is that it's perfectly okay to put the data on the table in terms of saying, hey, you want business, you want these 20 things. Technology, we've got these 20 things, right? Now, every one of them has got a cost benefit associated with it, right? In some cases, you're going to have business stuff that turns around and people say that, hey, I'm going to grow top line by 20% if I do this new thing, right? And you're going to turn around and say, as an IT guy, you're probably going to turn around and say, hey, if I don't do these 5 things, you're not going to be able to go out there and sell those 20, sell more to be able to get that 20% more. So a very important part of understanding how to balance off tech debt versus business requirements is actually that process of having that discussion. But come with, and this is a point that George made very early on in our discussion, make sure that you've got the data around it. What's the benefit? What's the cost of something versus the benefit of something? So that you can actually sit there and draw a line and say, okay, this is stuff that we can afford. This is stuff that I think we need to do, but okay. And this is stuff that is nice to have. We would love to have it, but is it something that we can actually afford to do? So the moment you start to rank order some of these things, right, with your stakeholders, you'll find that the discussion changes quite a bit. But it's important to have that discussion. So Gaurav, I hope that that helped you. If there are any other questions, anything else we're going to take, we've got time for maybe a couple more, but actually no, we're out of time. So George, thanks so much for being on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it. This was great talking to you. And, we'll talk offline anyways. But thank you so much for taking the time because, Saturday Night Fever is a fledgling show, which I just started this up and thanks to Crater. I've got this opportunity to bring people like you here into the mainstream and get you to talk to, great guys like you need to have their voices heard, and people need to hear your voice. Right. So thank you for doing that. I really, really appreciate it. So have a great time, guys. And I hope, audience, I hope you really enjoyed it. Please keep coming back. Next week, actually, we're going to be moving the show from a bi-weekly or bi-monthly to a weekly. So next week, stay tuned. We're going to have another very exciting guest coming on board next week. And I will tell you that watch my LinkedIn feed and stay tuned. So George, thanks again for this session. I really, really appreciate it, my friend. All the best. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Bharat. Thank you so much for the invitation.
I hope you had fun, right? Most important is you got to have had fun.
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah,
All right. See you guys. Take care, man. Bye. Thanks.